Zarthok the Destroyer stood 8 feet tall, his purple skin gleaming under the harsh lights of the arena. Scars crisscrossed his massive frame like a roadmap of countless victories. His forearms moved with deadly precision as he crushed the skull of his latest opponent, a reptilian creature from the Vega system. The crowd of 10,000 aliens roared their approval from the floating platforms surrounding the combat pit. Ladies, gentlemen, and assorted beings of the Galactic Empire, the announcer's voice boomed through the stadium's translation systems. Once again, our champion remains undefeated. Zarthok has now won his 300th consecutive battle. The massive warrior raised all 4 arms to acknowledge the cheers. His yellow eyes scanned the crowd with the cold calculation of a predator. In 12 standard years of fighting, he had never met an opponent who could last more than 10 minutes against him. Most died within 3. Emperor Vexnal himself had declared Zarthok the strongest warrior in the known galaxy. 300 worlds paid tribute to avoid facing him in combat. Entire species had surrendered rather than send their champions to certain death against the destroyer. But Zarthok felt empty. After the crowd dispersed, he returned to his quarters aboard the Empire's flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The room was sparse, containing only a meditation platform, weapon racks, and a massive tank where he soaked his scarred hide in healing fluids. Trophies from defeated enemies lined the walls. Horns, claws, weapons, and other mementos of his victories. Admiral Kixara, a snake-like being with 6 eyes, slithered into the room without knocking. As the Emperor's military advisor, she was one of the few beings who dared approach Zarthok uninvited. "Another impressive display, Destroyer," she hissed, her forked tongue tasting the air. "The Emperor is pleased. Your next opponent has been selected." Zarthok didn't turn from where he stood cleaning his primary battle blade. "What poor fool faces me this time?" "Something interesting. The humans of the Sol system have finally responded to our challenge. They're sending a champion." This made Zarthok pause. Humans were a relatively new species to join the galactic community. They had only achieved faster-than-light travel 50 standard years ago. Most civilized species considered them primitive, barely more advanced than the animals on their homeworld. "A human?" Zarthok's voice rumbled with amusement. "They're sending one of those tiny pink creatures? I've seen them before. Weak, soft, with no natural weapons. I could crush one with a single hand." Admiral Kixara's eyes glittered with malicious pleasure. "That's what makes this interesting, Destroyer. They specifically requested you as their opponent. Not just any gladiator. They want to face the Empire's strongest warrior." The Emperor found their audacity amusing and agreed. Zarthok set down his blade and turned to face the Admiral. What could they possibly hope to accomplish? Are they trying to commit suicide in a dramatic fashion? Intelligence reports suggest the human they're sending has never fought in a public arena before. Our spies on Earth couldn't find any record of him in their military forces or fighting tournaments. He appears to be completely unknown. Unknown? Zarthok's 4 hands clenched into fists. They dare insult me by sending an amateur? Someone with no reputation? No victories, no skill? The Admiral's smile revealed rows of needle-sharp teeth. The Emperor sees it as an opportunity to demonstrate the Empire's superiority over these upstart humans. When you destroy their champion in front of the galaxy, it will serve as a warning to other species who might consider defying us. Zarthok began pacing the length of his quarters, his heavy footsteps echoing off the metal floor. In all his years of fighting, he had faced the greatest warriors of hundreds of worlds. Champions who had trained their entire lives for combat. Masters of ancient fighting arts passed down through generations. Beings enhanced with cybernetic implants, genetic modifications, and powerful weapons. And now they wanted him to fight a human nobody. "When?" he asked. 3 standard days. "The human is already en route to the arena station. He should arrive tomorrow." After the Admiral left, Zarthok stood before the wall display showing his battle records. 300 victories, 0 defeats. Every major fighting style in the galaxy learned and mastered. He had studied the combat methods of 600 different species, from the poison-clawed Zephyrians to the multidimensional quantum wraiths. But humans were different. They had no natural weapons, no claws, fangs, or armored hide, no psychic abilities or technological implants. They were physically weaker than almost every other sentient species. What could one possibly do against a warrior of his caliber? The thought nagged at him. Why would an entire species risk such humiliation? Humans had a reputation for being unpredictable, but this seemed like madness. They had to know their champion would die. They had to understand that failure would bring shame upon their entire world, unless they knew something he didn't. Zarthok accessed the Empire's database and began studying everything available about human physiology and culture. What he found puzzled him further. Humans were indeed physically inferior to most galactic species. Their bones were fragile, their muscles weak, their reflexes slow by galactic standards. Yet somehow these seemingly helpless creatures had survived on a death world that regularly killed stronger species. They had developed weapons of mass destruction while still confined to their home planet. They had gone from primitive agriculture to space travel in less than 10,000 years. A blink of an eye compared to most civilizations. And buried deep in the classified files, he found references to something called asymmetric warfare, a human concept that seemed to involve winning battles through methods other than direct confrontation. For the first time in years, Zarthok felt something he had almost forgotten: curiosity. 3 days later, he would step into the arena to face this mysterious human champion. He expected it to be over quickly like all his other fights, but something in the back of his mind whispered that this encounter might be different. He had no idea how different it would be. The arena buzzed with excitement as beings from across the galaxy filled the floating platforms. Word had spread about the unusual match, the mighty Zarthok facing an unknown human. Betting pools favored the destroyer at odds of 10,000 to 1. Most spectators came simply to witness what they expected to be the shortest fight in arena history. Zarthok emerged from the gladiator tunnels to thunderous applause. His polished armor gleamed under the arena lights, and his forearms carried his favorite weapons: a plasma sword, an energy mace, and 2 throwing axes that could slice through starship hull plating. He had never felt more prepared for battle. The crowd's cheers turned to confused murmurs as the human champion entered from the opposite tunnel. He was small, even by human standards. Barely 5.5 feet tall, with a lean build that looked almost fragile next to Zarthok's massive frame. He wore simple black clothing that seemed to absorb light, making him appear like a shadow against the bright arena floor. His face was calm, showing no fear despite facing certain death. Most shocking of all, he carried no weapons. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice cracked with disbelief, "the human champion appears to be unarmed? This is unprecedented in arena history." Emperor Vexnall leaned forward in his royal box, his crystalline features reflecting confusion and annoyance. "Is this human mocking us?" he demanded of Admiral Kixara. The snake-like admiral's eyes darted between the Emperor and the arena floor. "Perhaps it's a cultural misunderstanding, Your Majesty. Should we offer him weapons from the armory?" "No," the Emperor hissed. "If the human wants to die unarmed, let him. It will serve as a lesson to his species about proper respect." Down in the arena, Zarthok studied his opponent with growing irritation. The human stood perfectly still, breathing slowly and evenly. His dark eyes seemed to take in every detail of his surroundings without focusing on any single point. There was something unsettling about his complete lack of fear. "Human." Zarthok's voice boomed across the arena. "I am Zarthok the Destroyer, champion of 300 worlds. State your name so I may honor you in death." The human bowed slightly, a gesture of respect that surprised many in the audience. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but carried clearly through the arena's acoustics. "I am Kenji Nakamura. I represent Earth and humanity in this challenge." "Kenji?" Zarthok stumbled slightly over the unfamiliar syllables. "You carry no weapons. Do you wish to surrender?" "I need no weapons for this encounter," Kenji replied calmly. The crowd erupted in laughter and jeers. Several alien nobles in the premium seating began placing additional bets, convinced the fight would last less than 30 seconds. Zarthok felt his pride burning. This insignificant creature dared to claim he needed no weapons? Against the strongest warrior in the galaxy? The insult was intolerable. "Then you will die quickly." Zarthok raised his plasma sword and charged across the arena floor, his heavy footsteps shaking the reinforced platform. What happened next would be replayed across the galaxy for generations, as Zarthok brought his sword down in a strike that could have cleaved a shuttle in half. Kenji simply wasn't there. He had moved to the side with fluid grace so smoothly that many spectators missed the motion entirely. The plasma blade struck empty air, sending sparks flying from the arena floor. Zarthok spun, swinging his energy mace in a wide arc that should have caught the human regardless of where he dodged. But again, Kenji flowed away from the attack like water, ending up behind the massive warrior. The crowd fell silent. For the next 5 minutes, Zarthok unleashed every technique in his vast arsenal. He struck with the fury of a hurricane, combining attacks from dozens of fighting styles developed across the galaxy. His forearms moved in perfect coordination, creating a web of death that no opponent had ever escaped. Kenji avoided them all. He didn't block, parry, or counterattack. He simply moved. His steps were perfectly placed, his timing flawless. He seemed to know where every attack would land before Zarthok even began the motion. It was as if he could read the warrior's intentions directly from his mind. More disturbing still, Kenji never appeared rushed or desperate. His breathing remained calm and steady. His movements were economical, never wasting energy on unnecessary motion. While Zarthok grew increasingly frustrated and tired, the human seemed to be meditating in motion. "Fight me," Zarthok roared, throwing both axes simultaneously while thrusting with his sword and striking with his mace. Kenji stepped through the attacks like he was walking through a gentle rain, untouched and serene. The arena had become so quiet that the sound of Zarthok's labored breathing echoed off the walls. 10 minutes had passed, longer than any opponent had ever lasted against the destroyer. The human hadn't thrown a single punch or landed a single blow, yet somehow Zarthok felt like he was losing. "Why won't you attack?" Zarthok demanded, pausing his assault. Kenji stopped moving and faced him directly. "Because there is no need for violence between us." "No need? This is a death match. One of us must die." "Must we?" Kenji's voice held genuine curiosity. "Who decided this? Why do you believe it must be so?" Zarthok's confusion grew. "I am a warrior. You are my opponent." "This is what warriors do, is it?" Kenji stepped closer, apparently unconcerned that he was moving within striking range. "You have won 300 battles. Have they brought you peace, joy, fulfillment?" The question hit Zarthok like a physical blow. He thought of his empty quarters, his hollow victories, the emptiness that grew larger with each triumph. I am the strongest warrior in the galaxy," he said, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. "And yet you are troubled," Kenji observed. "I can see it in your movements, hear it in your voice. You fight with great skill but no passion. You win but you do not celebrate. What is it that you truly seek, Zarthok the Destroyer?" For the first time in 12 years of fighting, Zarthok lowered his weapons. Around them, 50,000 spectators held their breath, witnessing something unprecedented in the arena's bloody history. The strongest warrior in the galaxy was having a conversation with his opponent in the middle of a death match. And somehow, the human's quiet questions felt more dangerous than any weapon Zarthok had ever faced. The silence in the arena stretched until Emperor Vexnal's crystalline voice shattered it like breaking glass. "What is this mockery?" His words carried the fury of absolute power. "Destroyer, kill the human immediately or face execution for cowardice." The threat snapped Zarthok back to reality. He raised his plasma sword but hesitated. Kenji stood motionless, showing no fear of death, no preparation to defend himself. His calm acceptance was more unnerving than any war cry or challenge. "You heard the Emperor," Zarthok said, but his voice lacked its usual commanding tone. "One of us must die. Must we obey a command that serves no purpose but entertainment?" Kenji asked quietly. "Look around you, Zarthok. What do you see?" Despite himself, Zarthok glanced at the crowd. Thousands of beings screaming for blood, their faces twisted with bloodlust and excitement. Nobles betting on how long his opponent would survive. Children being taught that violence was the answer to every problem. "I see an audience," he said uncertainly. "I see beings who have forgotten that strength without wisdom is mere brutality." Kenji gestured toward the royal box. "Your emperor sits safely above while ordering others to die for his amusement. What honor is there in this?" "Silence." Admiral Kixara's voice hissed through the arena's communication system. "Human, you will fight or be executed as a coward." Kenji turned toward the royal box and bowed respectfully. When he spoke, his voice somehow carried to every corner of the massive stadium without him raising his tone. "Honored Emperor, I did not come here to fight. I came to learn." The crowd erupted in confused murmurs. Emperor Vexnal's crystalline features darkened with rage. "Learn? What could a primitive human possibly learn from the Empire's greatest warrior? I wish to understand why beings who could create such marvels as this station, who can travel between stars and unite hundreds of worlds, still believe that strength can only be measured through destruction. Kenji began walking slowly around the arena's perimeter, his movements fluid and purposeful. Zarthok found himself turning to track the human's path. Weapons still at the ready but no longer actively threatening. Your champion Zarthok is indeed powerful, Kenji continued, addressing the entire crowd. His skill is remarkable, his dedication complete. But has his strength brought peace to the galaxy? Have his victories created anything lasting? His victories have brought order, Emperor Vexnal declared. Fear of the Destroyer keeps rebellious worlds in line. Fear is not strength, Kenji replied. Fear is weakness disguised as power. True strength builds rather than destroys. It protects rather than dominates. It creates understanding rather than terror. Zarthok watched, fascinated despite himself, as Kenji moved through what appeared to be a combat form. But instead of violent strikes and aggressive postures, his movements flowed like water, each motion connecting seamlessly to the next. It was beautiful in a way that made the warrior's trained brutality seem crude by comparison. What are you doing? Zarthok asked. This is called kata, a moving meditation that teaches the body to flow with natural forces rather than fight against them. Kenji's movements never paused as he spoke. In my culture, we believe that the greatest victory is the one that requires no battle. Impossible, Zarthok scoffed, but his voice held less certainty than before. Without battle, how do you prove your worth? How do you show strength? Kenji stopped moving and faced him directly. May I demonstrate? Before Zarthok could respond, Kenji walked to the arena wall where several large stone blocks served as decorative elements. Each block weighed at least a ton and was solid granite imported from a quarry world famous for its density. The human placed his palm against the largest block and closed his eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, without any visible effort, Kenji's hand began to sink into the stone as if it were soft clay. When he withdrew his palm, a perfect handprint remained pressed deep into the granite. The crowd gasped in amazement. Even Zarthok took an involuntary step backward. How? The warrior demanded. By understanding the nature of the stone and working with it rather than against it, Kenji explained. Everything in the universe has a natural flow, a rhythm. When you align yourself with that rhythm instead of fighting it, incredible things become possible. He moved to another block and with gentle pressure from a single finger, split the stone cleanly in half along its natural grain lines. Your fighting style is magnificent in its power, Kenji said to Zarthok. But power without understanding is like a river trying to flow uphill. It requires enormous energy and achieves little. You speak in riddles, Zarthok growled, but his 4 hands had unconsciously lowered his weapons. Then let me show you more clearly. Kenji returned to the center of the arena. Attack me again, but this time pay attention to what you feel rather than what you intend. Zarthok hesitated. The Emperor commands that one of us die. The Emperor commands many things. But you are not a slave, are you? You are a warrior. A warrior chooses his battles based on honor and necessity, not the whims of others. The words hit Zarthok like a revelation. When had he stopped choosing his fights? When had he become nothing more than an instrument of someone else's will? He looked up at the royal box where Emperor Vexnal glared down with cold fury. The crystalline being had never fought a day in his life, never risked anything, never put his own existence on the line. Yet he commanded others to kill and die for his entertainment. I am a warrior, Zarthok said slowly, as if remembering something important. Yes, Kenji agreed. And a true warrior protects what is precious, not what is convenient. Tell me, Zarthok, when did you last fight to protect something rather than simply to win? The question struck deep. Zarthok tried to remember his early battles before fame and glory had consumed him. He had once fought to defend his homeworld from raiders. He had battled to protect weaker species from oppression. When had those noble purposes been replaced by mindless spectacle? I cannot remember, he admitted. Then perhaps it is time to remember what it truly means to be strong. Kenji extended his hand in a gesture of friendship. I did not come here to defeat you in battle. I came to offer you something far more valuable than another victory. What? Zarthok asked, staring at the offered hand. I came to offer you a choice. You can continue as you have, winning meaningless fights for the amusement of others, growing emptier with each hollow victory. Or you can discover what real strength looks like. Around them, the crowd began to grow restless. Shouts of fight and kill him echoed from the stands. But for the first time in 12 years, Zarthok found himself truly thinking about his next move rather than simply reacting with violence. The strongest warrior in the galaxy stood at a crossroads, facing a choice that would change everything. Zarthok stared at Kenji's extended hand for what felt like an eternity. Around them, the crowd's bloodthirsty cheers grew louder and more demanding. The Emperor's rage radiated from the royal box like heat from a sun. But in that moment, the universe seemed to shrink to just two beings standing in an arena, one offering something the other had never known he needed. What kind of strength? Zarthok asked, his voice barely audible above the crowd's roar. The strength to choose your own path. Kenji replied simply, the strength to build instead of tear down. The strength to find peace within yourself instead of seeking validation through others' fear. Before Zarthok could respond, Admiral Kixara's voice cut through the arena like a blade. Guards, the destroyer has been compromised by enemy mind control. Terminate both combatants immediately. Energy weapons emerged from hidden ports around the arena's perimeter. Automated defense turrets swiveled toward the two figures standing in the center of the killing floor. The crowd's cheers turned to screams of panic as they realized they might become collateral damage. Zarthok's warrior instincts flared to life. Without thinking, he stepped in front of Kenji, raising his forearms to shield the smaller human from the incoming weapons fire. Get behind me, he commanded. But Kenji didn't move to hide behind the massive warrior. Instead, he placed a gentle hand on Zarthok's armored shoulder. There is another way, he said calmly. They're about to kill us both. This is not the time for philosophy. This is exactly the time, Kenji replied. Watch and learn. The first energy blasts fired simultaneously from 12 different turrets, creating a web of deadly light that should have vaporized both combatants instantly. But something impossible happened. Kenji moved, not away from the blasts but among them. His body flowed like liquid shadow between the beams of energy, each step perfectly timed, each movement precisely calculated. He wasn't just dodging. He was dancing with forces that could turn metal to vapor. More incredible still, somehow his movements were affecting the targeting systems. As he wove between the energy beams, the automated systems began to malfunction, their targeting algorithms confused by his impossible grace. Beams meant for him struck other turrets instead, creating a cascade of destruction that spread through the arena's defensive grid. Within 30 seconds, all 12 turrets had been destroyed, not by violence, but by their own confusion as they tried to track a target who moved like water through their predetermined patterns. The arena fell silent except for the hum of burning electronics and the whisper of Kenji's breathing. Zarthok stood frozen, his weapons forgotten in his hands. How did you? By understanding the systems instead of fighting them, Kenji explained, not even breathing hard despite his incredible display. Those turrets were programmed to target specific movement patterns, aggressive charges, defensive retreats, predictable combat maneuvers. But they couldn't track something that moved in harmony with natural rhythms instead of mechanical patterns. Impossible! Emperor Vexnal's voice cracked with disbelief and fury. No being can move like that. Any being can move like that, Kenji corrected, looking up at the royal box. They simply need to stop fighting against their own nature and start working with it. Zarthok lowered his weapons completely. The demonstration had shattered something fundamental in his understanding of combat, of strength, of what was possible. Teach me, he said. The two words echoed through the arena like a thunderclap. The strongest warrior in the galaxy, undefeated champion of 300 worlds, was asking a human to teach him. Kenji smiled. The first emotion he had openly displayed since entering the arena. Teaching requires time and patience. Are you prepared to learn differently than you have learned before? The guards are coming, Zarthok warned, noticing armored figures beginning to pour into the arena through the gladiator tunnels. They'll kill us both, will they? Kenji looked at the approaching soldiers with mild interest. Or will they choose to listen instead of react? As the first wave of guards reached the arena floor, something unexpected happened. They stopped. Not because of fear or confusion, but because Zarthok stepped forward to address them. I am Zarthok the Destroyer. His voice boomed with all its old authority. I have served the Empire faithfully for 12 years. I have brought glory and tribute from 300 worlds, and I claim the ancient right of warriors to choose their own path. The guards hesitated, The rite Zarthok had invoked was older than the Empire itself, dating back to the original warrior codes that had united the first star systems. It stated that any warrior who had proven their honor in battle could not be compelled to fight against their conscience. The Emperor's orders supersede ancient traditions, the guard captain replied, but his voice held uncertainty. Do they? Zarthok asked. When did the Empire become more important than the principles that founded it? When did we decide that entertainment was worth more than honor? Kenji stepped beside the massive warrior, his presence somehow making Zarthok's words carry more weight. I came here representing humanity, Kenji said, addressing all the guards, the crowd, and the Emperor himself. But I see now that I came to represent something more than the possibility that beings who have grown apart through war and conquest can find common ground through understanding. Your destroyer is not your enemy, he continued, gesturing to Zarthok. He is what you could all become, strong enough to choose creation over destruction, wisdom over force, growth over stagnation. Emperor Vexnal's crystalline features twisted with rage. Guards, I command you to kill them both immediately! But the guards didn't move. They looked between their emperor, their greatest warrior, and the small human who had somehow managed to disable 12 automated turrets without throwing a single punch. For the first time in the Empire's history, absolute authority was being questioned by ordinary soldiers. I will not kill Zarthok, the guard captain announced, removing his helmet to reveal a scarred reptilian face. He has earned the right to make his own choices. And the human, he paused, studying Kenji with new respect. The human has shown us something we had forgotten was possible. One by one, the other guards followed their captain's example, lowering their weapons and removing their helmets in a gesture of respect rather than surrender. Zarthok felt something he had never experienced before, the support of others not based on fear of his strength, but on respect for his choice to grow beyond what he had been. What happens now? He asked Kenji quietly. Now, the ninja replied with a smile. Your real training begins. The ancient monastery on Kepler 442b had been abandoned for 3,000 years. Once a place where the original warrior philosophers had studied the balance between strength and wisdom, it now served as a refuge for those seeking to understand deeper truths. The stone buildings seemed to grow from the mountainside itself, designed to work with the natural flow of wind and water rather than dominate the landscape. Zarthok had never seen anything like it. This is where you learned? He asked Kenji as they walked through gardens where meditation circles were carved into living rock. This is where I am still learning, Kenji corrected gently. A teacher showed me these principles, but understanding them is a lifetime's work. They had escaped the Empire's flagship in chaos 3 weeks earlier. While Emperor Vexnal raged and Admiral Kixara organized search fleets, word of what happened in the arena had spread across the galaxy faster than any Imperial message could travel. A warrior choosing wisdom over violence was news that inspired hope in places where hope had been forgotten. Now, in the peaceful quiet of the monastery, Zarthok was discovering just how much he had to unlearn. Again, Kenji said patiently. Zarthok attempted the movement for the 100th time that morning. What looked like a simple step forward should have been easy for someone with his physical abilities. But every time he tried, his body moved with the aggressive precision of a warrior preparing to strike. I don't understand, Zarthok said, frustration creeping into his voice. My body knows how to move. I've mastered fighting techniques from 600 worlds. That's exactly the problem, Kenji replied. You've trained your body to be a weapon. Now you must teach it to be a living thing again. What's the difference? Kenji gestured toward a nearby waterfall where the mountain stream cascaded down smooth stone. Watch the water. Does it fight the rock? Zarthok observed the flowing water carving new paths through stone that had stood for millennia. No, it finds the easiest path. Exactly. Yet over time, which is stronger, the rock or the water? The massive warrior considered this as they continued walking. Everything about the monastery seemed designed to demonstrate these principles. Bridges that curved with the natural flow of the landscape, buildings positioned to catch cooling breezes in summer and warming sunlight in winter. Gardens where plants grew in harmony instead of competing for space. How long did it take you to learn this? Zarthok asked. I am still learning, Kenji repeated. But the first breakthrough came when I realized that my greatest enemy wasn't any opponent. It was my own need to prove my strength. They reached a training ground where several other beings practiced various forms of moving meditation. Zarthok recognized none of the species, but their movements all shared the same flowing quality he was struggling to achieve. "Who are they?" he asked. "Others like you, warriors who chose a different path." Kenji gestured to a tall, crystalline being whose movements sparkled with inner light. Vexandra was once a champion gladiator from the Rigel system. She killed over 200 opponents before she realized that each victory was making her weaker, not stronger. Weaker how? Each time she won through violence, she became more dependent on violence to solve problems. She was becoming less flexible, less creative, less able to see possibilities beyond fighting. Zarthok watched Vexandra move through a complex sequence that looked like liquid starlight. Her movements were beautiful, purposeful, and somehow more impressive than any combat technique he had ever seen. And him? Zarthok nodded toward a creature that looked like living shadow, its form shifting and flowing as it practiced. Nixtor was an assassin for the Dark Nebula cartels. He once boasted that he could kill any target without being detected. But living in shadow, being nothing but an instrument of death, was slowly erasing his own identity. What changed his mind? The same thing that changed yours. He realized that true strength comes from choosing what to build, not just what to destroy. Over the following weeks, Zarthok immersed himself in learning. The physical training was the easiest part, though even that challenged him in unexpected ways. Learning to move with natural flow instead of mechanical, precision required him to abandon techniques he had spent decades perfecting, but the mental training was far more difficult. "You're thinking like a warrior again," Kenji observed during one of their daily sessions. Zarthok had been attempting to meditate, but his mind kept analyzing potential threats in their peaceful surroundings. "I can't turn it off. I see every shadow as a hiding place, every sound as a potential ambush. Don't try to turn it off. That's still fighting against your nature." Kenji sat beside him on the meditation stone. "Instead, redirect that awareness. You're right to notice everything around you, but instead of looking for dangers, try observing the connections between things." Connections? How the wind moves through the trees, how the birds time their flights to catch the air currents, how the stream finds its path not through force but by sensing the landscape's natural inclinations. Slowly, Zarthok began to understand. His warrior's awareness, trained to detect conflict, could be transformed into something that detected harmony instead. The same skills that made him a deadly fighter could make him an instrument of peace. The breakthrough came during his 4th week at the monastery. He was practicing the flowing movements when he suddenly felt it, the rhythm Kenji had been trying to teach him. For just a moment, his body moved not as a weapon preparing to strike, but as part of the natural world around him. He felt connected to the wind, the stone, the growing plants, even the other students practicing nearby. In that instant, Zarthok experienced something he had never known in 300 victories, true strength that came from unity rather than dominance. "I felt it," he whispered to Kenji afterward. "What did you feel?" "Everything. I felt connected to everything." Zarthok struggled to put the experience into words. "All my life I've been fighting against the universe, trying to impose my will on it. But for that moment I was part of it instead of fighting it." Kenji smiled. "That feeling, that connection, that is what real power looks like. Everything else is just noise. But how do I keep it? How do I make it last? Practice. Every day, in every action, remember that you are not separate from the world around you. You are part of its flow, part of its balance." As the sun set over the monastery, Zarthok realized that for the first time in his adult life, he felt truly strong, not because he could defeat others, but because he had learned to work with the fundamental forces that connected all living things. The strongest warrior in the galaxy was becoming something far more powerful, a force for harmony in a universe that had forgotten how to be whole. The attack came at dawn, just as the monastery bells chimed the morning meditation hour. Imperial warships descended from the cloud layer like falling stars, their weapons already charging for bombardment. Admiral Kixara's voice echoed across the mountain valley, through massive speakers mounted on the lead destroyer. "Surrender the traitor Zarthok and the human terrorist, and the monastery will be spared. You have 60 seconds to comply." Zarthok stood in the central courtyard with Kenji and the other students, watching death approach from the sky. His old instincts screamed at him to fight, to grab weapons and prepare for glorious battle. Instead, he breathed deeply and felt the rhythm of connection he had been learning. 45 seconds, Admiral Kixara announced. "What do we do?" Vexandra asked, her crystalline form flickering with anxiety. We do what we have trained for, Kenji replied calmly. We respond with understanding instead of reaction. Understanding won't stop energy cannons, Nixtor pointed out, his shadowy form rippling with barely contained fear. Zarthok surprised himself by laughing. Won't it? Without waiting for permission or explanation, he walked to the center of the courtyard and activated the monastery's ancient communication array. His voice, when he spoke, carried to every ship in the attacking fleet. Admiral Kixara, I am Zarthok. I surrender myself to your custody. Shocked murmurs came from the other students, but Kenji nodded with approval. However, Zarthok continued, I request the ancient right of single combat to settle this dispute. As a warrior of proven honor, I challenge the Empire's current champion to face me in personal battle. Silence stretched across the valley. The ancient rite was older than the Empire itself, a tradition that even Emperor Vexnal could not ignore without losing face before the entire galaxy. The Empire's current champion is you, traitor. Admiral Kixara's voice cracked with frustration. Then send your best warrior. Send whoever has taken my place as the strongest fighter in your service. After a long pause, the Admiral's voice returned, colder than space itself. Very well. Graktar the Annihilator accepts your challenge. He has defeated 50 opponents since your departure. A smaller ship detached from the fleet and landed in the valley below the monastery. From its ramp emerged a creature that made even Zarthok look small by comparison. Graktar stood 12 feet tall, with 6 arms and natural armor plating that could deflect starship weapons. His species had evolved on a world where everything was predatory, creating beings that were living weapons. More concerning than his size was his reputation. Graktar fought with a berserker's fury that made violence itself seem beautiful. He had never shown mercy, never accepted surrender, never left an opponent alive. He's magnificent, Zarthok murmured, and he meant it. The approaching warrior moved with the deadly grace of a perfect predator. Will you be able to defeat him? Vexandra asked. Zarthok considered the question seriously. I don't know. But more importantly, I don't need to. What do you mean? Instead of answering, Zarthok walked down the mountain path to meet his challenger. Kenji followed, as did the other students despite the danger. Graktar waited in the flat area beside the landing pad, 6 massive weapons held ready in his 6 hands. Energy swords, plasma axes, and molecular disruptors that could tear apart matter at the atomic level. Traitor, Graktar growled, his voice like grinding stone. You have dishonored yourself and all warriors by running from battle. I didn't run from battle, Zarthok replied, stopping just outside the range of the Annihilator's longest weapon. I ran toward understanding. Understanding is for the weak. I will show you the strength of pure violence. Graktar attacked with the fury of a hurricane, all 6 weapons moving in perfect coordination. His style was breathtaking in its savage artistry. Every motion flowed into the next, creating a web of destruction that seemed impossible to escape. But Zarthok had learned to see differently. Where once he would have seen a deadly opponent to defeat, he now saw patterns of energy and motion. Graktar's attacks, while skillful, followed predictable rhythms based on his species' natural movements. He was fighting the way his instincts demanded, not the way the situation required. Zarthok began to move. Not to attack, not to defend, but to flow with the natural patterns around them. He stepped through Graktar's assault like Kenji had taught him, letting the Annihilator's own momentum carry his weapons past their target. Fight me, Graktar roared, spinning to track his elusive opponent. I am fighting you, Zarthok replied. I'm fighting your anger, your pain, your need to prove yourself through others' destruction. Words are not weapons, aren't they? Zarthok continued moving, staying just ahead of the increasingly frantic attacks. You're fighting harder now than when we started, but you're no closer to hitting me. Your anger is making you weaker, not stronger. It was true. Graktar's initial precise assault was deteriorating into wild swings as his frustration grew. His 6 arms, which had moved in perfect harmony, were now interfering with each other as rage override his training. What are you doing to me? The Annihilator demanded. Nothing. You're doing it to yourself. Zarthok's voice held genuine compassion. Tell me, Graktar, when did you last fight for something you believed in rather than just to win? The question struck home. Graktar's assault faltered for just a moment, and in that moment, Zarthok saw something unexpected in the massive warrior's eyes. confusion, pain, and the same emptiness he had once felt himself. "I fight for the Empire," Graktar said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Do you? Or do you fight because that's all you know how to do?" Zarthok stopped moving and stood directly in front of his opponent with an easy reach of all 6 weapons. "I know what you're feeling," he continued softly. "The hollow victories. The cheers that mean nothing. The growing certainty that no amount of winning will ever fill the emptiness inside." Graktar's weapons trembled in his hands. You understand?" "I understand. And I'm here to tell you that there's another way." For a long moment, the 2 warriors stood facing each other, predator and prey, except it was no longer clear which was which. Then Graktar lowered his weapons. "Teach me," he said, echoing the words Zarthok had spoken weeks earlier. Above them, Admiral Kixara's voice screamed orders through the communication system, demanding that the fight continue. But her words fell on deaf ears. 2 warriors had found something more valuable than victory. They had found hope for transformation. The test was complete. Zarthok had faced the Empire's strongest warrior and won, not through violence but through understanding. He had proven that the strength Kenji taught was real, practical, and powerful enough to change hearts that had been closed to everything but conflict. In the distance, Imperial warships hung in the sky like waiting vultures, but for the first time since this confrontation began, Zarthok felt no fear. Whatever came next, he would face it not as the destroyer, but as something new. A warrior who had learned that true strength comes from lifting others up rather than tearing them down. 1 year later, the news reached every corner of the galaxy. The Galactic Empire had fallen. Not through conquest or revolution, but through something far more profound. The simple refusal of beings across hundreds of worlds to accept that violence was the only solution to their problems. It had started with the guards who refused to kill Zarthok in the arena. Their act of conscience spread like ripples across space, inspiring others to question orders that served only to maintain power through fear. Soldiers laid down their weapons. Governors opened peaceful negotiations with rebellious worlds. Citizens of 1,000 species began talking to each other instead of preparing for war. Emperor Vexnal had raged, threatened, and finally retreated to his crystalline homeworld, where he ruled over a court of sycophants, while the galaxy reorganized itself around principles of cooperation rather than domination. The monastery on Kepler 442b had become something unprecedented, a center of learning where beings from across space came to study the art of strength through harmony. What had once been a forgotten ruin now housed thousands of students, teachers, and visitors seeking alternatives to the violence that had consumed their civilizations. Zarthok stood in the main courtyard, watching new arrivals practice the flowing movements he had once struggled to understand. Among them was Graktar, whose 6-armed kata had become a thing of wonder to behold. The former Annihilator now taught classes on redirecting anger into constructive action. "Do you regret it?" Kenji asked, joining him on the stone balcony overlooking the training grounds. "Regret what?" "Giving up your title as the strongest warrior in the galaxy." Zarthok considered the question while observing a group of younglings from 12 different species practicing together, their natural differences becoming strengths that complemented rather than competed with each other. "I didn't give it up," he said finally. "I discovered what it really meant." Below them, Vexandra was demonstrating to a mixed class how her species' natural ability to manipulate light could be used to create beauty instead of blinding opponents. Nixtor had developed techniques for using his shadow form to provide comfort and concealment for those who needed protection from harsh environments. The old empire measured strength by how much you could destroy, Zarthok continued. But destruction is easy. Any fool with a weapon can tear things down. True strength is building something that lasts. He gestured toward the scene below, where former enemies worked side by side to learn from each other. This is what strength looks like. Not one being dominating others, but all beings supporting each other to become more than they could be alone. A messenger arrived, a young human from the Sol system who bore news from Earth. "Master Kenji," she said, bowing respectfully. "The Terran Council has received formal requests from 47 different worlds asking for teachers in the human arts of diplomacy and conflict resolution." Kenji smiled. "And what was the Council's response?" "They're organizing the largest peaceful exchange program in galactic history. Teachers, artists, philosophers, and craftspeople from every participating world will spend time learning from each other. Including warriors? Sarthak asked with interest. Especially warriors. They want to learn what you and Master Kenji have created here. How to transform the skills of war into tools for peace. That evening, as the twin moons rose over the monastery, Sarthak walked the familiar paths that had become sacred to him. Students nodded respectfully as he passed, not because they feared his strength, but because they recognized his wisdom. He found Kenji in his favorite spot, a simple garden where mountain flowers grew between carefully placed stones. "I've been thinking about your question," Sarthak said, settling beside his teacher on the wooden bench. "Which question?" "The one you asked in the arena when all of this began. You asked what I was truly seeking." Kenji waited patiently for him to continue. "I thought I was seeking to prove I was the strongest, but what I was really seeking was connection. I wanted to matter, to be part of something greater than myself. Fighting was the only way I knew to make that happen. And now?" Sarthak gestured toward the monastery where lights glowed in windows as beings from hundreds of worlds studied, taught, and learned together. "Now I know there are better ways to connect, ways that build up instead of tearing down, ways that create lasting bonds instead of temporary fear." "You have become what you were always meant to be," Kenji observed. "And what is that?" "A teacher. A protector. A bridge between worlds that had forgotten how to speak to each other." As if to prove his point, a group of children ran past, laughing as they played a game that somehow incorporated traditional elements from a dozen different cultures. Their parents watched with smiles, former enemies who had become friends through their shared desire to give their children a better future. "There's something I want to ask you," Sarthak said. "Will you help me establish schools like this on other worlds? Not just for warriors, but for anyone who wants to learn that cooperation is stronger than competition?" "I thought you'd never ask," Kenji replied with a grin. Years passed, and the galaxy transformed in ways no one had imagined possible. The network of peaceful worlds grew to encompass most of known space. Conflicts that would once have led to devastating wars were resolved through understanding and negotiation. Art, science, and philosophy flourished as species shared their unique gifts with each other. And at the center of it all, in countless schools across hundreds of worlds, former warriors taught new generations that true strength came not from the ability to defeat others, but from the wisdom to help them succeed. Sarthak never fought another battle for the rest of his long life. He never needed to. He had discovered something far more powerful than any weapon: the ability to turn enemies into allies, fear into trust, and conflict into cooperation. The strongest warrior in the galaxy had indeed met a ninja and never fought again. But in choosing peace over violence and teaching harmony over domination, he had won the greatest victory of all. He had helped heal a broken universe and shown countless beings that there was always another way. In the end, that was the strongest thing anyone could be.